Viral Acharya and I proposed a bad bank. I was very much against the idea in the past because it was just transferring money from one pocket of the government to the other pocket. How would the bad bank do anything differently from the public sector banks that already owned the loans? I can see one reason for a bad bank to aggregate loans, which is it may be more effective in restructuring, handling those loans because it doesn't need the permission of the 18 banks who held the loans earlier. It aggregates those loans. But in order for that to work, the bad bank has to have the personnel who have the competence and the capability of negotiating with the private sector entrepreneur, the promoter, and ensuring that the banks get a fair deal. That today, that capability does not exist in the system. And the question is, how do we create that capability? How do we create a bad bank with that ability? But also the bad bank has to be quite transparent on the prices it pays the public sector banks when it buys the loans from them. It should probably also be willing to buy from the private sector banks. This is a different entity from the ones we've had in the past, and it cannot be governed by CBI, CIC, CAG, because that will ensure it does exactly the same thing as the public sector banks, which unfortunately today is too little. So that means an entity which is differently structured, has more, looks more like a joint venture or a PPP rather than a public sector entity.
Bad bank, at this stage, I don't think we need a bad bank really. If necessary, like for example, State Bank of India has its own asset reconstruction company. There is an ARC it has. So if it chooses to go that way, that's fine. But now we've got a proper bankruptcy process in place, and that is what we ought to use. I think that instrumentality ought to be used far more effectively than we have done that. The reason I also feel that when we talk about bad bank, our ministries are not able to move fast enough. Just remember how long it took, and still I'm not sure where it stands. The infrastructure investment fund that had been sort of promised in 2015 or 2016, it never took off. So it takes a long time, and also, but there was a time I would have said we should do it. When the bankruptcy process was not at work. But now, the IBC process is at work. I would strengthen that if necessary, and rely on the banks themselves to go to the ARCs if necessary.